Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, however, wherever, whenever you may be listening. Welcome back to episode 6 of the Pirate Peyton podcast. I'm going to keep this episode a little brief compared to some of my usual episodes, kind of recording this last minute, but I want to keep things in the habit of trying to upload every week as much as possible, although for my schedule it probably won't be, but week 1 of the NFL season, I definitely want to talk about a few things and give you this is a new segment we're going to have, my 6 best bets of the week. We're going to call it the Peyton Pick 6, and we'll keep track of how I do, and maybe I'll prove to you guys that you should listen to me and maybe cash in on some bets this year in the NFL. But week 1 is always like one of the hardest to bet because you just don't know what you're getting. It's very difficult. But we're gonna there's some definitely sharp bets, some sharp numbers in this week. So hopefully we'll at least maybe hit 500. But we'll see what happens with that. We'll get to that at the end of the show. But what I want to first talk about is what happened this week with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I actually found this out today. I had no idea this was even a thing, because I thought Russ's calf injury, I thought that was all good to go. I didn't hear the report on Thursday that he was dealing with it still. And we did our podcast today in the CMI, the We Are Family Pittsburgh Sports Podcast. Please go look that up on YouTube. We had a really great episode at Point Park in the CMI in person in their podcast studio, which was really, really, really nice. But anyway, and my friend Nathan was like, "Did you hear about Russ?" I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "He might not start." I was like, "You got to be freaking kidding me." And based on what Russ was saying, they seemed pretty hesitant to commit to being able to play. And Rappaport reported that Fields is heading towards the direction that he will start on Sunday. And you wait for week 1 for the whole season, and I was so much looking forward to seeing what Arthur Smith and Russ could do. I mean, I have my concerns, but I think it's one of the best fits we've had here in a while. Not that that's saying much. And as I've expressed on this podcast, I am not a Justin Fields fan, and I didn't want there to be too much quarterback controversy, although I knew there would be some. But we haven't had a snap yet, and now there's already going to be QB controversy, and it just creates a mess for the Steelers. They're just going to be so unorganized the first half of the year, and it's going to. Just the fact that this is already happening, it just goes to show, like, this season is just. I'm just very down on this season right now. The thing is, if they win with Justin Fields, then it's like, even if Justin Fields doesn't play that great, if they win with him, are they going to go back to Russ? I mean, it just makes things so much more complicated. And I think, and there's a chance because of, how explosive Fields is, that, he could have a great game on Sunday. Although with the O-line and the new OC, just all that, I don't think Fields and Smith are a fit. I don't see Fields having a good game. But even if he did have a great game, it's like, I don't trust him to be consistent, to read the field consistently, and to not turn the ball over. This guy is a turnover machine. And, I feel kind of deflated now about Sunday's game. You always look forward to week 1 as a fan, and it's just like, when you're not high on your quarterback that's going to play in the game, it just kind of gives me a bad feel, just not as enthusiastic. I mean, I was ready to ride, man. I was ready to ride more than anybody other than Russell Wilson himself. this does feel like a game that Mike Tomlin could pull off some Steeler bullshit and pull this game out of his ass. But yeah, I'm just not very enthused. I think there's a chance Atlanta could run us out of the building. And even if we win, it's just like it just makes things very complicated. It's really a bummer, I feel, and I feel bad for Russ. I really do. I think he's shown a lot of leadership, and I think he's earned the right to have this opportunity. And yeah, it's disappointing. But going on to other things with the Steelers, they made 2 big contract extensions. I want to first talk about Cam Hayward. It was a pretty big surprise actually that they did that. It kind of, to me, that's just like I don't have anything against Cam Hayward. I mean, the guy's a leader. He's been a great talent, very productive when he plays. But it's just like, just feels like the typical Steelers move. Just very outdated. We want to keep every single one of our defensive players that we may not necessarily need, that are good, but we may not necessarily need. We spend all our money on defense and spend nothing on offense. And it's just an outdated approach. And I thought Omar Khan, was kind of changing the Steeler way a little bit. But I think Tomlin pushed for this signing. Cam Hayward is old. He's a defensive lineman. Who knows if you're ever going to get that production ever again from Cam. And the thing is, you're already paying $28 million to be your star on the defensive line. Like, you can go cheaper at D tackle. There's so many guys you can draft probably in the next couple of years. You have Keanu Benton. Like, there's guys you didn't need to make. And I understand that Cam Hayward's a leader and he's just kind of a Steelers legend. But this just feels like a Tomlin pushed contract signing that, I don't know, could end up not looking very good down the line. As for Pat Freiermuth, one person did tell me that it was an overpay. I mean, what has Freiermuth done? Well, Freiermuth, when he gets the ball, is, he runs great routes. He gets open. When they actually design a game plan to work him over the middle of the field, he can be great. I think he's maybe statistically not a top 10 QB or top 10 tight end, but I think he's in that conversation. And he's getting $12 million a year. I don't know what the guarantee is, but he's getting $12 million a year, which is just under what Cole Kmet is making. And I think Freiermuth and Kmet, I think that's a pretty good comparison. I think it's a good deal for the Steelers, and I'm all for them spending more money on offense. And I think, Tomlin and Khan could easily agree to sign Freiermuth. But the Hayward signing just feels like, kind of just shows how Tomlin just has a little too much control over things. Wants to keep the defensive culture and got to keep the guys you developed, for all these years. And it's just like, is that really necessary? Is that really going to help get this team to where it should be? Or do we want to stick to 9 and 8 seasons? Yeah, I don't know. But, I'm a Cam Hayward fan. Although I didn't really like when he said that, I'll just go to Ohio. That kind of just made me, to finish my career if I don't get paid. And that just made me think, okay, if you're going to talk about going to our division rivals, then I think he specifically said Cleveland. I'm thinking to myself, I don't, I love Cam and what he's done, and he's a great human being, but I'm not gonna pay this guy. That's kind of how I felt. But the Steelers, they're loyal. You gotta give them that. They're very loyal. So the second part of the show, I want to go over my playoff teams, and my bubble team, because there's I can't exactly get it down to 7 because it's just too hard. But I can give you all at least 6 AFC and NFC teams that I think are definitely going to make the playoffs, and then a couple of bubble teams, and then maybe a couple teams, couple surprises, that of teams underachieving or overachieving. I don't know. I forget exactly what I have written down here, but I'm gonna go through it right now. So starting with the AFC East, I think the Bills, they have issues, but they're still the favorite to win that division. I think they will. The Jets are too much of a question mark. I like I said, I do think the Bills regress a little, but I think the Jets, I just don't know what I'm getting from them. We'll talk about them in a second. And that leads me to another point, which is I think the Dolphins are going to have a down year. They're missing a lot of pieces on defense. I don't trust Tua. And their schedule is pretty tough. If you look at their last 5-6 games, they play in cold weather against really good teams and just really good teams in general. This could be an 8 or 9 win Miami Dolphins team this year, and I think they could end up. And I love Mike McDaniel, but I mean, you can't make every single game. You can't make it easy for Tua. Every time they need him to come up with big boy throws and not easy reads that are designed by Mike McDaniel, he never gets it done. He doesn't win any big games, really. So, with the Jets being a wild card, the Dolphins, kind of stepping back this year, and then you have the Patriots. I have the Bills still making it in the playoffs because Josh Allen is incredible. He's going to figure it out. It doesn't matter the receiving core. His offensive line is pretty solid, and I think we saw Josh Allen play the best ball of his career last year with this new offensive coordinator they got, and they ran the ball a lot more. They were a lot more balanced. Moving on, AFC North, I have the Ravens and the Bengals making the playoff. Very, very high on both of these teams. I think the Ravens played so horribly the other night, and yet they could have easily won that game still. They were within an inch of going for 2 and possibly winning that game. I think Lamar Jackson is a more determined version of himself, and I think he can't run as much as he did last night, but I think that was kind of a special occasion because it was the Chiefs. But I think he's generally going to be a lot better as a runner, and he's not an elite passer by any means, but for his prototype, he's a very, very good passer. The Bengals, as long as Joe Burrow is healthy, he's going to be fine. I know the Bengals are, I think, could win the division possibly because the Ravens may take some time to figure things out with their O-line. I'm not exactly sure, but the Bengals, Joe Burrow, he's the only one who's beaten Patrick Mahomes other than Brady. They have the weapons. I think Zach Taylor doesn't get enough credit. I think he's a pretty good coach. Although maybe we'll find out because they did lose their offensive coordinator to the Titans. We'll see if it's really Zach Taylor who's running that offense or if it was Brian Callahan who was the true genius. I honestly don't know. But you don't need a whole lot of genius when you have Joe Burrow. And the defense, I know, is a concern, but they have their defensive coordinator is very good. And I think when you have an elite quarterback, your defense is going to play harder than when you have whoever it is they had last year. I can't even remember. Zach Browning, I think was his name. I think it was, his last name was Browning. But by the way, I don't know. I'm recording this on my phone, so you might hear the click of me signing back into my phone all the time. I apologize for that. Maybe the software will get rid of that, but I'm not exactly sure. But moving on, the Texans, I think they're very overhyped right now, but they're too good not to be. Look what they did, and their roster was pretty limited last year, and look what they did. You had Stephon Diggs. You add the edge rusher from Minnesota. I think DeMeco Ryans, he's a defensive coach, and you have the offense pretty much down. So the defense is only going to get better. I think, I don't think they're going to come out off to the races like people think, but I think the Texans should win that division. But they are in a tough division. I think the Colts and the Jags, I'll get to in a little bit here, I think they both are going to be vying for playoff spots. And the Titans, if you look at their roster, it's very good. We just need to figure out what Will Levis is and what Brian Callahan is. So it's a tough division, but the Texans are going to, they just have to be a playoff team with how special C.J. Stroud is and how their roster is improved. Then you have the Chiefs. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain that. As my sixth team that I have definitely going into the playoffs, and I may regret this, but I'm just such a big Jim Harbaugh fan, and I know that their receiving core isn't like elite, but I don't think that's going to matter with Justin Herbert. I think they may get off to a little bit of a slow start. Herbert didn't have a full training camp, new coach. It's a lot of adjusting, but I think Harbaugh is going to bring a physicality and a mentality that the Chargers organization has never seen. Yes, he's an offensive coach, but that also applies to the defense. He brings over Jesse Minter with him. I think they have a lot of talent on defense. They've just never been coached or schemed right. So if you can you have a solid defense with Bosa and Mack off the edge, and Lad McConkey works out, and Quentin Johnson proves he can play, and you have Josh Palmer, who I think is pretty underrated. I think the Chargers are a playoff team. There's always going to be one surprise team, and I think that's got to be them. And then there's a couple teams on the bubble that arguably I could like. On paper, I think maybe they're more talented than the Chargers. That's the Colts, the Jaguars, and the Jets. I mentioned with the Colts and Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence, he dealt with injuries last year. It was just a weird season. They started off really good, and then they fell apart. That's what gives me hesitance is like, why did they fall apart? And I think it had to do with Trevor was just not fully healthy. But Trevor is an elite talent. I think he's going to come in with, as I think someone put this, either Nate or Jake Levisky talked about this on our podcast today. They're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, or he is, on Trevor Lawrence. As for the Colts, we don't know what we're getting with Anthony Richardson, but you look at their defense, their front seven is pretty good. The back end of their defense is a concern, but I mean, look what they did last year. They almost beat the Texans to make the playoffs. So, and that was with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. Shane Steichen is an offensive genius. I mean, you saw how Jalen Hurts and the Eagles kind of fell off without Shane Steichen. So I'm very high on Shane Steichen, and I think the Colts are one of my. I wrote down some of my futures bets that I put in. I have them over 8.5, I think, and over 9.5 with the Chargers and wins, like in a parlay bet. But anyway, and then obviously my other bubble team is the Jets because I don't trust the owner-coach GM relationship. I like Robert Saleh. I think their GM has been pretty good, other than offensive line and quarterback, which is kind of the most important. Aaron Rodgers, always drama. If you remember 2 years ago with the Packers, he kind of had a declining year. Is he really going to be the same player? But at the same time, they won 7 games with that horrible offense because of how good their defense was. So the Jets could easily be a playoff team, but there's just a lot of dysfunction there, and I have that gives me hesitance. Some other teams, I mentioned the Titans. I think their roster is very good on paper, but I just don't know enough about the coach and the quarterback. And I think their division is extremely tough. And they may be kind of they may be getting the bad end of the straw. Not the bad end of the straw, but the short end of the straw. I believe that's the saying, but I could be wrong. It is very late right now, so we're getting through this. And then I have the Broncos. But But looking at the Broncos, these are others. These aren't my bubble teams necessarily, but these are just teams that are interesting. Like the Broncos, I think Sean Payton has a guy he really likes in Bo Nix, and I think Sean Payton, if he gets along with a guy, he's somewhat talented. He can deliver the football well. Like Sean Payton's going to get the most out of him, but their roster still needs a lot of work. And you have the Chiefs, the Chargers, who I'm high on, and even a Raiders team that, has a better culture now. I just don't really trust the quarterback situation and the offensive coordinator situation with the Raiders. And then another team is the Browns. Like, the Browns are a very, very good team. Defensively, although they did get smoked by Houston last year, they have a good offensive line. But the big thing is Deshaun Watson. I mean, is he ever going to get back to somewhat of the form he used to be? Can he stay healthy? Because, I mean, I know they have Jameis Winston sitting behind, but I don't think he's going to give the production of what Joe Flacco did last year if Jameis gets in. So, yeah, it's hard for me to trust the Browns, but I love their coach. Moving on to the NFC, try and move along here. Packers, Lions. Lions are better than they were last year. Just how they're improving on defense, especially. They kind of fixed their secondary situation. They got Arnold. That was a steal in the late first round. The Packers, I think they drafted a lot of young pieces. And I think they had a very good draft, especially on defense. Hopefully their defense improves. But as you saw, they couldn't stop the run. Although the Eagles' O-line and Saquon, that's a tough task. By the way, that game tonight, I'm so disappointed in the NFL. That was just a greed move to try and market in Brazil, and you have that horrible field, and you put players at risk. And I know the Jordan Love injury wasn't, and if Jordan Love is out for a significant time, I mean, the Packers are not going to be a playoff team. I mean, that's how important Jordan Love is. But assuming, all goes well, I mean, the Packers, I think, could be fighting for that division with the Lions. But, the Packers, that game tonight, it was just so weird. Just the whole game was just weird with everyone slipping. I mean, it affected the outcome of so many plays. I mean, the NFL is lucky that no one tore their Achilles or ACL or pulled something severely. That could have been an injury because of the result of how they couldn't get any traction on their feet on that field. I mean, that was just a disaster, and the feel of it was just very weird. Just stick to the regular countries, like, please. Anyway, moving on. The Falcons have all the pieces to be really good. It may not click right away because there's a lot of new pieces. Coach, offensive coordinator. I love their offensive coordinator. He's off the Sean McVay tree, which is a really good thing. I think Raheem Morris has the characteristics of a good head coach. The Rams have issues in their front seven with no Aaron Donald, and among other things. Their offensive line is not quite healthy, so they may take them a while. But I kind of have and that's who I'm going to move on to. I kind of have the 49ers making the playoffs but regressing this year. They're getting very old, the 49ers. Whereas at least with the Rams, they're getting younger. They're younger, but they're getting better. Like, a lot of these young players that the Rams had last year, they have a year under their belt now. A year or two under their belt. And the 49ers are just getting older. I don't really trust the quarterback yet. I mean, he's good. I think he's not like, I think you can't compare him to Jimmy Garoppolo because I think he has skills that are better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And the fact that he was, Mr. Irrelevant, it's impressive. Like, Brock Purdy deserves credit. But do I think he's elite by any means? No. I still think he has to have a lot of elements right for him. And there's just a lot of chaos with the 49ers this year. And I think they're getting older, especially on defense. That's where the old part, I think, affects them. I mean, we saw it in the playoffs last year. I mean, they got dominated at times by the Packers and the Lions. So I have the Rams winning that division unless they get off to a really poor start. But I still have the 49ers making the playoffs because they still have too much talent overall. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I only had 5 teams here. That's interesting. I guess because I think I have more bubble teams. There's just a lot of unknown in the NFC. The AFC, it's different because like you don't know who to choose because there's so many interesting, in a good way, teams in the AFC. Whereas the NFC, it's like, oh, there's a lot of holes, a lot of question marks. I think that, the NFC East, there's only going to be one team out of that division. So you got to figure it out where the Eagles and Cowboys are going to be fighting for that. The Eagles, the Eagles, on paper, they had a really good draft. They, Nick Sirianni is my main concern, but they did revamp the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator. Although Kellen Moore, I mean, he kind of stunk with the Chargers last year, and the Cowboys certainly survived without him. But they certainly look good tonight. I mean, I think the Eagles are the favorite to win that division. The Cowboys are going to be very one-dimensional, but their defense is very good. The Eagles' defense may take some time, but Vic Fangio, I think, is a very good defensive coordinator. So I think the Eagles would be my other playoff team if I had to pick right now. I think the Cowboys, there's a chance they miss the playoffs. But at the same time, they won 12 games 3 years in a row. I mean, maybe they regress a little bit, but if they win 10, 11 games, they're still a playoff team. And Dak and CD are still a dynamic duo, and that defense is still very dangerous. So you can't rule out the Cowboys. I think people are just tired of them because they lose in the playoffs, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to miss the playoffs. Bears, Caleb Williams is a phenom. They're very good on defense, and they have a bunch of weapons. There's no reason why, especially if the Packers, if Love is out for some time, there's no reason the Bears can't win 9 games at least this year. I could see them as a wild card team for sure. And then I think the Vikings are interesting as well. All those teams, I think the NFC North is the best division in football because even with the Vikings, I think Kevin O'Connell could have or not Kevin O'Connell. Oh, no, it is Kevin O'Connell. I can always confuse O'Connell and Stefanski. I think Kevin O'Connell could have give Sam Darnold a resurgence. He's a veteran. He's been around. When he was with Carolina, his numbers overall weren't even that bad. He was just with a bad team. He's always had the ability to be a good quarterback. It just never kind of it never kind of just, he never really got into a good rhythm with a good team. I mean, he was with the Jets and the Panthers. You have Justin Jefferson. Their defense is kind of suspect, but I like Brian Flores as a defensive coach. Vikings are interesting, but I don't know. I don't really see them making it, but they're a team to look out for, I feel like. The Commanders are interesting. I like the coach. I like the Cliff Kingsbury, Jane Daniels combo. But looking at their roster, they're just not very deep. They still have a lot of holes in that roster. I mean, he doesn't, other than Terry McLaurin, Daniels has really no one to throw the ball to. They just got rid of Jahan Dotson. And the defense, I think Dan Quinn improves the defense. I could see them as an 8-win, maybe a 9-win team as their ceiling. I think there's improvements with the Commanders. I think overall, there's just a lot of new, but it's positive new. Like, you have a competent coach. You got rid of Dan Snyder. Like, there's light at the end of the tunnel for the Commanders. The Cardinals, I like their coach a lot. They competed at the end of the year. Their defense is just so bad, but they do have a defensive coach, and the O-line is not very good. But Cardinals should be interesting. at least to watch with Kyler Murray. But I don't think they're a playoff team, or that close to a playoff team. They just need a lot of work with their roster still. The Bucks, everyone is so down on the Bucks, and I think they do. I kind of agree. I do think they regress, especially because with Dave Canales leaving, Baker needs a good offensive coordinator. But at the same time, I mean, the NFC South is so weak, and I mean, losing the offensive coordinator, that's one thing. There's only one thing that they're losing. I mean, they're bringing back all the same guys. Their defense is always going to be decent. You know, if the Cowboys have a down year, if the Bears and the Bears don't live up to the hype, I mean, I think they could sneak in as a wild card. And, you know, and who knows, if something happens with the Falcons, then they could easily still win the division. I forgot to go over, I did say about the Cowboys-Chargers over with wins. A couple other bets I placed. I have the Broncos. I kind of actually regret doing this, but if it hits, it's a pretty, because the odds are pretty low. I have the Broncos over 7.5 wins. I probably should have just done it at 6.5, but I didn't bet all that much on it. So if I hit it, it's a nice, little chunk of change. And I also have the Rams winning the NFC West. I feel pretty good about that bet. And that's, I mean, the odds are, the 49ers are still considered a heavy favorite. So I think I could cash in on that as well. So to end the episode, let's move on to the first ever Peyton's Pick 6 on this podcast, and it is episode 6. So that must mean something. Although I'm not off to a great start. One of my games of the week was the Packers +3 against the Eagles. I think the Brazil factor, I should have considered that more. It just made things such a wild card with that game. I am a lot higher on the Packers overall than I am on the Eagles, but damn, the Eagles, I mean, they look bad on defense at times, but definitely better than it was last year. And their offense with Saquon, I mean, they look much more dynamic. But I'm 0-1, so it's really just a pick 5 that I can really help you all out there with. If you need any help with picking some games this week. The first game that I like, and I think this is my favorite bet of the week, it's a team that I'm pretty high on this year, as I mentioned before. It's the Colts +3 at home versus the Texans. Everyone and their mama is betting the Texans this week. Everyone is on the Texans hype train. The Colts, it's a division game at home. Shane Steichen, they're getting 3 points. I'm going to take the points, and I think they win outright. I think this is one of the sharper bets of the week. If you're going to do one game, if I were to do one game, it would be this game. I'm very, very confident in this. Yes, Anthony Richardson is a question mark, but at the same time, he's similar to Lamar early in his career. Not that Anthony Richardson is going to be what Lamar is, but it's tough to defend him, especially with not a lot of tape on him. And the way Shane Steichen can get creative with him. Again, look what he did with Gardner Minshew. Colts +3. Colts will win this game. Moving on, another one of my favorite bets this week. Jaguars, not as much as the Colts, but Jaguars +3.5 at the Dolphins. Dolphins, a big public favorite this week, I believe. The Jaguars, I think, are the better team. They have the better quarterback. A healthy Trevor Lawrence. Jaguars might have some fans in the stands. I don't know. Although it's not like they have a huge fan base or anything. But I like the number here, getting the extra half point. And the thing is, like I said about week 1, you can't really base it off of anything you saw last week. So it's kind of like how I'm feeling about the teams. I'm higher on Jacksonville and kind of lower on the Dolphins. So I'm going to take the points with Jacksonville there with plenty of comfort. And The next game I have is the Broncos at the Seahawks. I'm gonna actually swallow the points here and take Seattle -6. I know I just said I'm betting an over with the Broncos, but for Bo Nix to walk into the 12th man and have a good game, I feel like that's very unlikely. And based on something I heard today, the Wise guys are very, very optimistic about their new coach, Mike McDonald. They think he's a defensive whiz. And Seattle's problem over the last several years has been defense. Geno Smith has been quality, although I don't necessarily know if he's going to continue how good he's been. Although he did decline a little last year, but he's still pretty solid. But if the Seahawks defense can be good, I mean, there's a chance they could maybe sneak into the playoffs. But I mean, that's a team I didn't talk about earlier. But for this game specifically, Seahawks defense, I think, is going to give Bo Nix trouble. The crowd noise is going to give Bo Nix trouble. I think it's still going to be a relatively close game. Like, I don't think the Seahawks are going to blow them out, but I think Seahawks wins by 7 to 10 points. I'll take the 6. Not one of my favorite bets, but it's you got to take some chances. Got to take some chances in week 1. Another game I'm going to take, this is pick 4, well, technically pick 5. Bucks -3 and home against the Commanders. If you can get the money line, take the money line. I mean, I would take the money line on the Colts because the odds are lower. And that's probably the one I feel most confident in. But Bucks -3. I was kind of going back and forth on this game, but I just heard that the weather is going to be horrible. And you have Jaden Daniels, his first game in horrible weather. I'm going to take Todd Bowles and Baker. They've been there, done that. I'm going to take them to cover this game. And I think the Bucks they have to know that everyone has stopped talking about them and everyone has hyped up the Falcons. I think that gives them a little extra motivation going into week 1. The Commanders, they're going to have a lot to figure out. Although there's a lot to be excited about with them. I'll take my man Baker Mayfield. I don't know. I'd say Mike Evans is my guy, but I love Baker. Baker's a good story. I'll take them to cover at -3. Then this is a very risky one, but this is a pretty sharp one. I would say, based on what I've heard, and this team is so hard to trust, but the team they're playing against, they have no momentum. They have their coaching situation is just a mess. So with that being said, I'm taking the Panthers to cover in the Superdome against the Saints. I don't know if it's still called the Superdome or not, but +4. I think the Panthers. I think Dave Canales is going to end up being a really good coach. I think Bryce Young has a lot to prove. They definitely improved on offense, maybe not drastically, but on the offensive line, they added Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen. He's old, but he's still a quality target. You have this Leggett kid who's interesting. The Saints, I mean, I heard something today that their fan base is the least enthusiastic in football, and rightfully so when you have Dennis Allen as your head coach. I mean, he could be one of the first coaches fired this year, possibly. Although the Saints always are kind of like the Steelers. They manage to hang around. And I think Derek Carr's, solid. And they did get a new offense. But I like the +4 here. I really like the +4. I think this is a close game. The Panthers are going to play pretty well. And you have to remember, the Panthers have a really good defense. Even though they were awful last year, their defense was on the field a lot. So that caused them to have some blowouts. But their defense overall is actually pretty decent. The Saints' offense is just, they don't really have any weapons other than Olave and Kamara. Derek Carr, I don't think has had the right coaching. Clint Kubiak, I think, is an upgrade for them, but I don't know. It starts with their head coach, really. The offensive coordinator is important, but I think the Panthers, they're going to be better this year. They're going to be better. I'll swallow the 4 points. I picked them to win, actually, in the We Are Family Pittsburgh Sports Podcast. So I'll say that they win, but I feel more confident that they'll cover than that they'll win. So that does it for the pick for week 1 of Peyton's Pick 6. Already 0-1, but we'll see how Sunday goes. An additional bet, not a game, but I think an interesting bet would be the Cardinals-Bills game, taking the over at 48. I think with how bad the Cardinals defense is, I know the Bills, lost Stephon Diggs, and there's some question marks at the receiving core, but I think Josh Allen could move the ball pretty easily on the Cardinals, and I think the Bills' defense is going to be good, but there's some question marks in that secondary off the edge a little bit. I mean, with McDermott, they'll be fine, but overall, but I think Kyler Murray gives them problems. The Bills kind of tend to play down to their competition too, but the point is, I think all of that equals a very high-scoring game. So over 48 would be a solid bet. I think I'm going to take that. Now, I do want to explain. I don't bet a lot of games for money. I'm trying to do that a little more this year, but not like a lot. Only on games I really, really like. But I'm in a league where I have to bet. I've been doing this for several years now, where actually, you put in a fee. You don't bet money. You don't actually bet the games with money, but you put in your picks and they count as points. And then however many points you get, you finish a certain place in the league, and then you can win a cash prize. So a lot of these games for that league I may take, but if I'm actually betting it on a betting website, I may only take 2 games that I actually would. So that over bet I would probably do in my cash league, in my cash league where I don't actually bet the games. I would take that over. So I'll kind of make that clear for now on. I'm actually going to put money on this one, or I'm not actually going to put money on this. I would say the Colts, I'm probably going to put money on. The Jaguars, I'm going to put money on. And that would probably be it. I still have time to think about it, but yeah, this episode was probably a little wonky, but thank you all so much for listening. We're trying to sustain the schedule, keep the uploads going. Thank you for all your support. Again, go check out the We Are Family Pittsburgh Sports Podcast on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter, as always, at Pirate Peyton. Have a fun Sunday afternoon and evening watching Week 1 of the NFL. Have a good one.